all of them have started their day. I think there was 3 that was not in this category. But out of the top Fortune 500 companies, the people who run those companies, by 6 o'clock every morning, they are well into their day. Some of them starts at 4:30. They get up at 4:30 and go exercise, and at 6 o'clock, they're in the office having already exercised. Okay? This discipline, that's how people get there. Michael Jordan, top of his game, discipline, exercise, shooting, all of that. Just, it's amazing. So what I'm trying to say is that if you want to be successful, and especially if you want to be highly successful, you've got to exercise a degree of discipline, distinguished discipline. Now, let's look at 2 Bible characters that exercise a degree of discipline. The first one we want to look at tonight is Joseph. Joseph. See, sometimes we think about people, we hear about people, we read about people, even Bible characters, and we say to ourselves, oh, I sure wish I could be like them. You can be like them if you will exercise distinguished discipline. That's what it is. If you discipline yourself, you can get there, you can do it, you can be there. But what happens, many people are unwilling to put in what is necessary in order to reach that level. And so I'm just not willing to do that. And that's okay. But if you're not willing to exercise a degree of distinguished discipline, then do not complain about the results you don't get. You know, if you won't shoot 1,000 free throws a day, then don't complain because you keep missing them at crucial points in the game. If you won't get up and exercise, then don't complain about being stiff. You can't have it both ways. So you got to exercise a degree of distinguished discipline. And if you do that very well, there are very few things that you cannot accomplish, and very few things that you cannot improve or get better at doing. You got to exercise. You got to exercise distinguished discipline. Now, Genesis chapter 39, we want to look at the story of Joseph. Genesis chapter 39, most of you are probably very familiar with this story, but I want to read it because I want to simply emphasize the degree of discipline that he had to exercise. Genesis 39 and verse 6. So he left everything. Now that's Pharaoh, who is the ruler of Egypt. He left everything he owned in Joseph's charge. So Joseph was in charge of everything. He was second in command in Egypt. He left everything he owned in Joseph's charge, and with him there he did not concern himself with anything except the food which he ate. Now that's some kind of way of living. The only thing you have to worry about is eating. You've got somebody that works for you, and they take care of everything, and you don't have to worry about anything. That's some kind of living. That's called the lifestyle of the rich and famous. You don't have to worry about what you're going to wear. Somebody take care of it. You ain't got to worry about whether it is washed and ready. Somebody take care of that. You don't have to worry about whether the utility, you don't have to worry about anything. The only thing you have to worry about is your food. You know, that's the way children are. The only thing that children worry about is eating. You know, 3-year-old children don't worry about the utility bill. They don't worry about whether the insurance is paid. They don't worry about whether the mortgage is. They don't even worry about whether you have money to buy groceries. All they concern themselves is there's something in the refrigerator when I open the door. And this is, he's living some kind of lifestyle. Worry-free, because Joseph took care of everything. And Joseph was given that responsibility because of his distinguished discipline. Okay? So, the king, Pharaoh didn't have to worry about anything except what he ate. Now look at verse number 6 again. So he left everything he owned in Joseph's charge, and with him there he did not concern himself with anything except the food which he ate. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. So Joseph was a good-looking man. verse 7 of Genesis 39. It came about after these events that his master's wife looked with desire at Joseph. And she said, lie with me. But he refused and said to his master's wife, behold, with me here, my master does not concern himself with anything in the house, and he has put all that he owns in my charge. There is no one greater in this house than I, and he has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do this great evil and sin against God? And she spoke to Joseph day after day. He did not listen to her to lie beside her or be with her. Now it happened one day that he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the household was there inside. She caught him by his garment, saying, lie with me. And he left his garment in her hands and fled and went outside. Now that took some discipline. That took some, to say no. Distinguished discipline. If Joseph had not distinguished himself with his discipline, then this story likely wouldn't even be in the Bible. It's in here because he was a man of tremendous discipline. And so he exercised a great degree. How often do people say, well, somebody asked me, I did it. They asked me, I did it. Joseph exercised unbelievable discipline. All right, now let's look at a man named Daniel. Over in a book by his name, Daniel chapter 1. Daniel chapter 1 and verse number 8. Daniel chapter 1 and verse number 8. Now, remember, Pharaoh was ruler. As ruler, he had access to the best-looking wives, the best-looking women, everything. So obviously, Pharaoh's wife was a very attractive woman. And so here we have, with Daniel, we have a situation with the king's food. Well, you know he's got the top of the line food. He's got the tasty. He has the grass-fed beef. He doesn't have the corn-fed beef. He has the grass-fed. He has the free-range chicken. Okay? Now, Daniel chapter 1 and verse 8. But Daniel made up his mind that he would not defile himself with the king's choice food or with the wine which he drank. So he sought permission from the commander of the officials that he might not defile himself. So now, here is Daniel, and he said, you know what? I don't want to eat the king's choice food. I don't want to eat those prime rib. I don't want those pork chops. I don't want those steaks. I don't want those lamb chops. I don't want that wine. I don't want to defile myself with that. I'm wanting permission to just eat vegetables. Now look at verse 9. Now God granted Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the commander of the officials. And the commander of the officials said to Daniel, I'm afraid of my lord, the king, who has appointed your food and your drink. For why should he see your faces looking more haggard than the youths who are your own age? Then you would make me forfeit my head to the king. But Daniel said to the overseer, whom of the commander of the officials had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, please test your servants for 10 days, and let us be given some vegetables to eat and water to drink. Now that took some kind of discipline. 10 days. No meat, no meat, no wine, just vegetables and water. Just cabbage and water. Turnip greens and water. Vegetables and water. That level of discipline. So Joseph exercised a degree of distinguished discipline. Daniel exercised a degree of distinguished discipline. And then thirdly, Jesus exercised a degree of distinguished discipline. As a matter of fact, Jesus modeled discipline. Matthew chapter 4 and verses 1 and 2. He modeled discipline. He modeled discipline. Remember when Jesus was baptized in Matthew chapter 3. Now look at chapter 4. As soon as he was baptized, no doubt when a person is baptized, you expect life to improve, to get better or something. Now look at chapter 4 and verse 1. Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And after he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights. What's the longest anybody in here has ever fasted? Anybody ever fasted? Maybe you're like me. You just fast forward to the next meal. That's the longest fast you've done. Now, can you imagine? Well, I have fasted. I have fasted, I don't know, 4 or 5 days or something like that. I can't remember. Once you get past the 3 days, it gets easier. Once you get past 7 to 10 days, it actually becomes even easier. But 40 days, that required some discipline. Now, keep in mind, he has the power to just create food. So it's not like he's in the wilderness and he's stuck out there and there's no food available. He could have had some food if he'd have wanted it. So he's exercising discipline. So Joseph exercised a degree of distinguished discipline. Daniel exercised a degree of distinguished discipline. And here Jesus is exercising a degree of distinguished discipline. So he modeled discipline. And then he taught discipline. Let's go to Matthew chapter 6. Matthew chapter 6 and verse 16. Now, you might not like this passage because this might be somewhat indicting of us. Matthew 6 and verse 16. Matthew 6 and verse 16. Now, notice what Jesus said. This is Jesus speaking. He said to his disciples, whenever you fast. He just assumed that they would be fasting. So he says, when you fast now, don't put on a gloomy face as the hypocrites do, for they neglect their appearance so that they will be noticed by men when they are fasting. Truly I say to you, they have their reward in full. But you, when you fast, anoint your head, wash your face, so that your fasting will not be noticed by men, but by your Father who is in secret, and your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. Now, he says, I want you to have enough discipline to fast and say nothing about it. Now, that's discipline on 2 levels, because guess what happens? Whenever we do something, we want people to know about it. Now, suppose a conversation was going on and someone said, you know, I run 1.5 miles every day. If you run 2 miles, what are you going to say? You're going to tell them, I run 2 miles. If someone say to you, I get up every morning at 6 o'clock and exercise, guess what you're going to say? I get up at 5:30. There's just something in us that makes us do that, okay? And so he said, when you fast, just do it. Just exercise discipline. Now, here's what I've tried to tell you tonight. That if you want to exercise a degree, if you want to reach the spirit of excellence, you've got to start exercising discipline. That's just what you have to do. And following instructions and exercising discipline, because the spirit of excellence is a degree of distinguished discipline. And so we began to walk those steps toward that spirit of excellence. So we follow instructions and we discipline ourselves to follow those instructions to the best of our ability. And we discipline ourselves to follow those instructions and get better and better and better at it. How many of you have seen FAMU's marching band? Anybody ever seen that? Okay. Now, I tell you what. At the end of the football season, the Rose Bowl, the Sugar Bowl, and all of those different bowl games, and you look on television or if you're there at the game, and you notice how precise, how aligned these people are, how in step they are. Now, if you could go back to the first day of practice, it didn't look like that. There were some freshmen. This is their first time in formation with FAMU. The drum major, the band director is yelling, screaming, and fussing at them because they look like a bunch of lost people. But guess what they did? They kept distinguishing. They kept following instructions. They kept following instructions, and they got better. They kept following instructions, and they got better. They disciplined themselves to follow instructions. And now, by the end of the season, it's a whole new game. Why? Because they followed instructions, and they have distinguished themselves by their discipline, and they now have a production that people all over the world like to see. Now, nobody would pay to see their first day of practice. But guess what? People would pay to see their last day. Why? Because they have followed instructions and they have distinguished themselves by their discipline. You know, isn't it amazing? You look out there on New Year's Day and the band is marching and they don't have on an overcoat. They don't have an overcoat. It's cold. But guess what? They're not standing out there shivering. They aren't dressed with a fur or mink coat. Whatever they have, it's not that warm. But they have disciplined themselves. There is a man who stands at the tomb of the unknown soldier. Discipline. There is and you can Google this, once President Barack Obama, it was a windy day, and he was getting on the plane, and the Marine was standing there having saluted. Well, his cap blew off. And the president went and got it and put it on, but the guy never moved. He never flinched. He just stood there. Discipline. Discipline. There is a soldier that they rotate and take turns standing at the tomb of the unknown soldier, and they stand there just straight. Some of you might know Raymond Presley. His son was killed in Afghanistan. I went to the funeral. There was a veteran, I'm assuming he was a veteran, older white guy, it was a white guy and a white woman. They looked to be at least in their 50s, and they stood at attention throughout that entire funeral and never moved. And that funeral was 3 hours plus long. And they stood there, and they probably didn't even know the boy. But because of their commitment and their connectedness to being a veteran, etc., I mean, they stood there. They stood there throughout the entirety, and they never moved. One at the head of the casket and one at the foot, and they stood there throughout that funeral service. Discipline. Now, if they had been standing, shuffling and walking around and sitting down, I wouldn't have even told you the story. Why did I notice it? Because they distinguished themselves. I was sitting up on the podium. I was just thinking here, oh, I need to go to the bathroom. I don't want to have to walk off this stage in front of all these people. But these people just stood there, disciplined, okay? So Jesus modeled discipline, and he taught discipline. Now, let me give you two things I want to leave with you that's so important. Distinguished discipline is worthy of admiration. If you want to be admired, exercise discipline. If you want to be admired, exercise discipline. Distinguished discipline is worthy of admiration. All you got to, who do you admire? You don't admire people who don't have any discipline. I mean, you admire a person that can ride a unicycle at one wheel. A person can ride a unicycle and juggle a bowling ball and a baseball bat. That takes discipline. So you admire that. A person who attempts to ride and keeps falling off, we don't admire him. Okay? So distinguished discipline is worthy of admiration. Now, here's the second point. Distinguished discipline is worthy of imitation. That's who you want to imitate. You don't want to imitate people who are failing. You want to imitate people who have accomplished a degree of distinguished discipline. So, here's your challenge tonight. I want to challenge you to locate an area in your life. You decide what area it is. Start out. We're going to get you to the spirit of excellence. So I want you to locate an area in your life, and I want you to begin exercising discipline in there. Just take one area of your life. It might be that you decide, you know what? I'm going to start putting things back where they're supposed to be whenever I use them, so my house is never cluttered. That may be a starting place. I'm going to put everything. I'm never going to take things. I'm never going to pull my shoes off and leave them in the floor. When I pull them off, I'm going to put them where they're supposed to be. If I pull off my coat, I'm going to hang it up. I'm going to put it where it's supposed to be. I'm never going to eat and leave the plate on the table. I'm going to go to the sink and wash the plate and put it up. Whatever area of your life you want to. It might be that you want to exercise discipline in the area of study. And you say, I'm going to devote 30 minutes a day to study. And you might come home one day and you're tired and sleepy, and you say, oh, I'll just read an hour tomorrow. No, exercise a degree of distinguished discipline and read those things. Make yourself do that. Make yourself do that. Exercise a degree of distinguished discipline. So you select an area, and then you get that area of your life, spirit of excellence. And then get another area of your life. And then start exercising discipline. And when you get that under control, take another. See, don't think that people just wake up one day and everything fell into place. No, they had to work. They had to follow instructions to get there. They had to exercise discipline. And they will tell you that when I started out, I didn't do this so well. I didn't do this so well at all. As a matter of fact, I was so terrible at it, I thought about not doing it. That's what happened to me with my golf game. I went out to play golf, and not golf, that was my tennis. They told me I did pretty good in golf, but I went out to play tennis, and I thought, ooh, no, I'm terrible at this. And so I was unwilling to practice. Matter of fact, I never went on a tennis course. Well, I think one more time. That wasn't my interest. I didn't. My suspicion is if I had exercised discipline and practice, I could have gotten better. I just wasn't willing because playing tennis was not that important to me. But if you take important areas of your life, writing is an important area of my life. When I first started writing, I didn't really know how to write. When I first started, I wrote a newspaper column in Jonesboro, Arkansas, and one of my co-workers hated the Church of Christ. So I wrote a Saturday newspaper column. It came out every Saturday. When I got to my desk every Monday morning, she had taken a red marker and marked up every grammatical mistake on my column and put it on my desk. Every Monday morning when I got to my desk, and then she would laugh at me and make fun of me. Every morning, every Monday morning. And guess what? So I started paying attention. I started studying grammar. I started paying attention to subject-verb agreements. I started looking at that. And guess what happened? The newspaper column began to have fewer and fewer red marks. I disciplined. What if I had said, I don't care? Well, since writing was something that I wanted to be doing, I needed to exercise discipline in that area. And so that's what I did. So I'm challenging everybody. You decide what area of your life you want to get better. It might be managing and controlling your temper. That may be the area you've decided. Or you might have that bad habit of just cutting people off every time they start talking. And you might decide, you know what? I'm going to let people finish what they're saying. You got to exercise this. That's how you get better. All right? So the spirit of excellence is a degree of distinguished discipline. We appreciate you taking the journey with us tonight. We invite you to take the journey with us again next week, same time, same station. Until then, be encouraged. Any questions?